Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We just finished up checking out a Radiohead, I was going to say Radio Shack, I feel old, a Radiohead song for this week's theme, but we also have one on special selection today. This one comes from Bratislav, Radiohead, Life in a Glass House. Or maybe Glass House, since it's all one word, I'm not sure. This comes off of Kid Amnesia. Let's dive into it. See what's going on with some Radiohead. Very interesting chord choices. Quite a bit of instability in here, creating a lot of tension, but also an overwhelming darkness or weight.
She is putting on a smile.
A trombone and clarinet.
Talk politics and don't throw stones. Your Royal Highnesses. Of course I like to sit around chat. Of course I like to stand you flat.
The vocal melody is interesting in where it places accents and how it phrases itself.
To sit around chat, but someone's listening.
But there's also interesting phrasing all over the place, especially when you take into how counterpoint is working between the several instruments playing lead.
We are hungry for lynching. That's a strange mistake to make. You should turn the other cheek. Living in a glass house. Of course I like to sit around and chat. Of course I like to stand you the fat. Well, of course I like to sit around and chat. Is someone listening?
Interesting track. Is jazz at the end of the day. Some of the trumpet lines felt like it dipped outside of jazz into, I don't know. There were some lines that I think if they had stuck with them, it was like 6, 7 notes, maybe 8 notes, something like that. Something that if it had been longer, a larger amount of time spent in that area, I might have been able to piece it together. But as soon as it gets on the tip of my tongue, I'm like, oh, they're going in. They reel it back in a little bit. And I kind of lose that train of thought. I don't hear that so often on the trombone or clarinet. They are fairly always within this bluesy sound and the jazzier improvisation. But the bluesy sound is interesting too. Because harmonically, the song's kind of all over the place. I don't know where I want to start with this. There's so many topics, and I don't know which one is going to segue into the others nicely. I think I'm just going to start with my expectations for this. Not that I had any, but they were still subverted somehow. When the song starts, we got a rhythm section. We got some sort of bass tone. I think it is just the left hand piano, but I also feel like I heard bass guitar at times in here. We have some drums, very light, very open, lots of spaciousness there, really just kind of keeping the general pulse and allowing the rest of the track to breathe. The piano, though, this is where we get all of our harmonic information. And at first I thought we were just bouncing between two chords, one slightly less tense, one slightly more tense, gives us our pendulum swinging, all of this within a really moody, bleak I think is the wrong word, but there is a sorrow, a weight to all of this. I don't know if sadness is necessarily where I would take this emotionally, but there is a weight cascading down onto the listener, onto the vocalist as they tell their story. I think the vocals tend to give things a little bit more of a dreary mood, which kind of puts my mind more towards sadness, but I don't know if it's actually in part of what the chords of the piano is actually playing. Regardless, there's more than just these two chords that I had initially factored in. There's quite a few chords in this actually, and at times I almost felt that it wasn't cyclical at all. Rather than a pendulum swinging, there's a linearity to all of this. Sometimes that linearity will feature cycles. For a moment, we will loop in this area, but then we will continue on. And maybe down here we'll loop for a little bit too, but eventually we will carry on from that. There might be some larger patterns at play, but for a first-time listen, I could not pick up on them. The linearity of the chord progression introduces a lot of diverse emotions and usually paired well with the vocals, which I think is where part of my expectations were subverted. What I thought I was understanding at the beginning of the track was a rather moody two-chord song, ends up being this emotional exploration through tension, darkness, anxiety, and release. There are moments on this track that stand out to me as if there's a feeling that maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. A suspension of pain and distress for a moment before crashing back down. And this crashing back down shows up quite frequently, as there'll be a lack of emphasized beats for a while as we create this uplift in a couple of chords, and then when we come back down there is a heavy accent, not just from the piano and the drums, but also from the vocals. And this is really interesting because I did not expect the vocals to be as in sync with the piano as they ended up being. So frequently in the beginning of the track, the piano and vocals just kind of did their own thing. Both of them emotionally leaning into this vibe, but neither one of them really recognizing the other and operating cooperatively with them to craft a deeper connection in the music. They just happen to be two things on the same wavelength simultaneously. And I really love how they end up complementing each other about halfway into the track. There's several sections where the vocals will hold out a note, one that is filled with tension and directionality, informing us that we need to be moving somewhere else to resolve this chord. And instead of the vocals resolving downward into the resolution, the chord ends up tensioning up into the note that the vocals are singing. There is a type of resolution there, even though we aren't aiming towards or landing on more stability. It's almost as if the vocals were a type of seer looking into the future and seeing how the song would evolve and getting there first, even though it isn't where the chord would naturally go in a standard song. It's still where it ended up being, lining up with the vocals despite the vocals getting there first. It's a very interesting idea, and we hear it all over this track. Resolution felt through tension. An inverse of the expectations of the melody to line up into the the following chord, rather than the chord evolving into something that would match the tension of the melody of its leading tone. Very interesting use of harmony and melody in these occasions. And of course, like I mentioned, along the way, there's a linearity to the harmony too, and it takes us through a variety of different feelings and emotions that sort of sit around this moody dreariness, but can certainly go into darker or lighter sounds in order to create a bit of a pacing and narrative structure to this song. That's half the track right there. And given how singular and monolithic this song is, this next section is probably going to be the last one. There's really only one other piece to this song that we need to discuss. The other instruments. This is a double-edged sword for me. I like the instrumentation. Clarinet, trombone, two very cool instruments. Almost any time that jazzy ideas end up being brought to a rock area, it's always a saxophone. Always a sax. And for good reason, dude. Sax sounds great in rock and metal. I'm not disputing that. But it is very much the trope. So I enjoy hearing the wider palette here. Clarinet, trombone, very cool. We do get a trumpet, which is more common, but it ends up being a great addition as it takes some of the strength that we heard in the trombone, both being brass instruments, and elevating that into these higher pitches. The trumpet is just blasting some of these notes, incredibly powerful, nice higher pitched ideas. Very strong. It comes through in a very different way than the trombone and the clarinet, which tends to be moodier, rooted, less energy, maybe even feeling a little of uncertainty in their lines, in their solos. The trumpet has impact. It has power in a way the other two instruments don't. I like that contrast there. Overall, this trifecta, this triangle of instruments is a great addition to the vocals, to the piano, to the drums. Individually, some of these melodies are very well done. I enjoy the solo aspect to it, improvisational or not. There's some neat lines in here that I think work well as counterpoint to the vocals or the other instruments around them. But more frequently than not, it turns into a cacophony of sound. There's a reason why, if you go to a metal concert, and there's a guitar solo. It's a single instrument soloing. If there's a second guitar, they're going to trade off, fours or eights, or they're going to harmonize. You go to a jazz performance and there's a solo section. There's one instrument soloing. Counterpoint is something that can be done and has been done forever in music. The more instruments you add in your counterpoint, and counterpoint is just multiple melodies operating simultaneously, but the more melodies that you're going to have, the more counterpoint, the more areas of conflict that you can run into. If you just have one instrument, you just have to make sure that note-wise, they're good against the chord. There's no contrast, there's no dissonance going on there. Nothing heavy unless you're aiming for dissonance. And usually the only rhythmic element you need to worry about is maybe the drums, a bass guitar, some sort of rhythmic instrument here. But you can usually get away with a little bit more rhythmic clashing with that. You add another instrument, now you need to pair both of these notes at any given moment because they're changing pitches more often than your chords are changing. And they're also having competing accent placements too, something that might feel like a right time to accent a note in one line doesn't in another. Now you can have rhythmic clashing and melodic or harmonic clashing. You add in a third and fourth instrument there and it just compounds. There's so many places for these ideas to create friction within each other and against the song as a whole, the general pulse and cadence of your rhythm section and the general movement of your foundation, your harmonic palette. It is difficult to do all of that. And then you also have to create space because most listeners have the attention to listen to one, maybe two melodies max. Once you go past that, it's something that requires multiple listens to really get and can sound like a bunch of stuff happening that you can't pay attention to. I think that's what happens here, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it might be what they're aiming for. There is too much happening. It becomes cacophonous. Each of the ideas, the vocals and all three solo instruments work well on their own. They work well against the rhythm section, including the piano in that statement. But it's just too much to keep track of, and frequently these instruments will butt heads. They will create friction. They will play a note that works well with the chord but clashes with the note another instrument is playing. The rhythmic devices, cadences, and accent patterns clash. It ends up feeling noisy, a lack of cohesion between all of these different parts. The fact that there is a lack of cohesion almost consistently when all four instruments are playing feels intentional. It is one of those cases where if you just go at it haphazardly, you're going to have a mix of palatable sections and unpalatable sections. And the fact that this song pretty much leans in contrast, in chaos exclusively, tells me that all of this was chosen specifically. Otherwise, there would be some really amazing sections in here where things just lock together. And we don't ever really get those. So this type of anti-cohesion, cacophony of sounds is intentional, but it's also intentional that everything sounds good on its own. Water and oil going on here. Things that work well on their own, but don't work well when they're mixed. And we're seeing that across four elements. I'm not sure how to understand this. There are parts where I think that this idea comes through in a semi-digestible fashion, but just as many sections that make me think of the Mars Volta, and they're more noodly, exploratory, loud, abrasive sections where there's just too much going on, and it's kind of tough to see what it's trying to say beyond the noise, the cacophony of it all. It's an interesting idea, and I think that if their goal is to create something noisy and clashing, they've achieved it. But I don't know that I enjoyed enough of it to want to come back to it. I do appreciate it from an artistic perspective, though. I think, again, if they're trying to achieve a specific metaphor in their music, they probably nailed it. But I don't think I enjoyed it subjectively. Let's hit some lyrics on this, see what's going on there. Here we have a song of someone who wishes they could be themselves, but can't because they are too much under scrutiny and surveillance. Doesn't quite explain why that might be, but the chorus, I think, makes it incredibly clear. Of course, I'd like to sit around and chat. Of course, I'd like to stay and chew the fat, but someone's listening in. They can't just be themselves and chat with someone, have a good laugh. They have to put on a facade. Verse 2 says that you don't talk politics and you don't throw stones. We also have the idea of the glass house here. One who lives in a glass house should not throw stones, an idiom meaning not to throw criticisms towards other people that could be levied at yourself. Again, don't talk politics, don't throw stones. Basically, don't try to say anything inflammatory, don't say anything that could be misconstrued, that people could take sides on. Be bland, be digestible, be marketable. Because anyone could be listening in to what you're saying and could misconstrue something you said or report something you said exactly as you said it, and other people could misconstrue it. It's very easy that when you are under surveillance, in this case, maybe because of popularity or notoriety, you might have, I don't know, it's interesting, 2 Radiohead reactions in a row, I bring up paparazzi. You could have the press trying to always get something about you into their papers. And so you always have to present this perfect, palatable version of yourself. Verse 3, the reason why I think this might lean towards a press angle, it says, you are all hungry for a lynching once again. The idea that anger sells, being upset, rage sells. It's a lot easier to sell a magazine or an article nowadays, to get people to click on articles, if you make them upset. To say that this person did something wrong rather than that this person did something charitable. That's the entirety of the song. Not a lot to it. I think back to the music and the somber elements of it, and I wonder if we aren't in a type of mourning. A sadness permeates this for the most part. I'm still not sure how that triumphant trumpet comes into play. There's nothing in here that feels triumphant at all. It feels like cowering in order to retain your sanity in a situation that is nonstop and can easily drive you insane. But there is a loss of autonomy in this song. A manufacturing of the self that may not be who you are, and it's not even just when you're in front of the camera, but all of the time, because someone is always listening. It is the death of the self. I wonder if the dreary element of this isn't some sort of elegy for who you are and how you'll never be able to be them again. These are my thoughts. Life in a Glass House, Radiohead. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, is a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.